In this next piece, Grand Chief Mike Delisle Jr. speaks to political press attaché Joe Delaronde about oil pipelines, the tobacco industry here in Kahnawà, and federal legislation on matrimonial real interest, a law that the MCK is in strong opposition to. Kahnawà will have 1 year from the time it passes to supersede it with its own law. Let's go to the clip.
The federal government is going through with its legislation regarding the breakdown of marriages or relationships, and it all relates to land. Council put out a release today stating its position. Maybe you can just give us the background on this and what's going on.
Sure. It started several years ago. Conservative government is looking to change land tenure, not only in Kahnawà, but obviously across Canada, Indian country. We know that there unfortunately are breakdowns in marriages, partnerships, and so on. We don't disagree with the position, but they've taken it far in a different direction. It now has opposition from Native women's groups across Canada, as well as Quebec Bar Association. Us, it's more of a principal argument. We can't allow them to offload their responsibility and fiduciary obligation to the provincial courts and government, which is where it would fall. It's our land, it's for Indians as the Indian Act prescribes, but more importantly, as we know it, it's Kahnawà and it's for us only. So we want to ensure, starting next week with a position paper and a actual presentation to the standing committee in Ottawa stating our position. We will be looking again to community to hopefully come forward and support through a decision-making model, again, CDMP, our own law, because they have already stated that if the communities across the country have their own law, that it will supersede the federal legislation. So here's a real opportunity for us to ingrain our jurisdiction and have it recognized externally. There is a real threat here to Kahnawà lands as we see them and know them now. We don't want any further encroachment from federal government and any legislation that they would pass on us.
Okay, let's talk about some other things going on. Recently, Enbridge was in the news. They're looking at reversing the flow of their pipeline and increasing the amount that they can do run through there. But another company is also in the news, Canada Pipelines, and they're looking at something else, and we don't want to confuse the community here. It's not the same issue here, it's something else. Maybe you can fill us in.
Sure, absolutely. Enbridge, first of all, is an existing line that's almost 40 years old that we have environmental concerns about. A presentation was made here to Council a couple of weeks ago, and a week ago Friday we put in a position to the National Energy Board to be heard at these national hearings to let them know what our positions are and what those serious, as we consider them, environmental risks are in them reversing the flow of Line 9B, as it's called. So it's an existing line. We have concerns given the age of the infrastructure that's there, although it doesn't cross what's recognized as Kahnawà, but still traditional Mohawk territory on north shore of Montreal and culminating in the east end of the island of Montreal, crossing two major parts of St. Lawrence and Ottawa River. So we have serious environmental concerns. That's Enbridge. The Trans-Canada Pipeline would be a brand new piece of infrastructure going from, as it says, coast to coast. And we're not in any stage of discussion and or negotiation with anybody at this point, because it's going to be a long process before they're able to, if they want to call it consultation or consult with individual communities. I know that there's already people in the community that have said, you know, it can't be allowed to happen. We're not at that stage yet. It's a proposal. They're looking to build this thing. We'll get there when they come.
More of a heads up at this point.
Absolutely.
Thirdly, if we can, at the most recent community meeting, there was discussion on tobacco. It's a long-standing, slow-moving file. There seem to be always developments on the federal side and policing side. What can you tell us right now is the current state of development of possible regulations in Kahnawà at this time?
Well, first, I'd like to go back a little bit further. The reason why it was brought on the agenda again for community discussion at the last community meeting was to show that we are not going to react, but it needs to be raised again, the awareness in the community that the federal government is proposing legislation, and nothing's been drafted at this point or tabled, that would ensure jail time for people who would be caught and found guilty, incriminated in what they consider the illegal tobacco trade. So it was a good discussion. Both pro and con for regulation were discussed at the meeting. No I would say, decision at this point, but there is a position from council to say, why don't we put it to the community decision-making process and decide once and for all, if it can be said that way, does the community want regulation for the tobacco industry, for it to continue to prosper and be an employer in the community and so on. So a lot of aspects that go into that, and the Tobacco Working Group is working on that. So that's really where it's coming from right now, from council to say community needs to make a decision on where this thing is going to go.
Has anybody from the industry said anything pro or con on this?
Both, not only at the meeting but afterwards too. Some people actually have even approached me saying it's time to do this. One person reached out and saying they want to have a discussion because obviously they have a vested interest. It seems like, and I don't have the barometer for sure, but it seems like the people in the industry are a little bit more open to not council but a communal regulatory agency to look at trying to alleviate all of these concerns and problems that have plagued the industry for the past 20 years or so.